Hey, hi, hello, yes. What is up? Keep it going. My name is Dan Frampton. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing something just a little bit different. Simmer down, everybody. Simmer down. That's right, we're not doing news. I know you're excited. I know you want to jump up out of your chair, but don't even worry about that today. It's not about a situation. There's no drama. There's no controversy. Nothing like that. Other than the controversy that we're just gonna drum up by just having this highly polarizing conversation where everybody on Earth is gonna have a different opinion. We're talking about the Mount Rushmore of punk rock music. Now, to most people, they might take that as like, I'm gonna give you the 4 best punk rock acts. Other people might say, I'm gonna give you the 4 most influential acts. But that's not the Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore absolutely represents 4 specific things: the foundation, the expansion, the development, and the preservation. So today I'm gonna give you a band that represents all of those very highly specific things, and we're gonna fill in a little bit of a Mount Rushmore, you and I. But just for fun, I'll give you the other kinds of Mount Rushmores at the end. I'll give you my top 4, and I'll give you the 4 most influential. So you're getting 3 Mount Rushmores in one video. Well, potentially 12 bands. There might be a little bit of overlap here and there. Now, the first principle we're going to talk about is the foundation. Now, I'm not going to talk about proto-punk stuff. I think that's like pre-foundation, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna be talking about the foundation of punk rock, and for that we gotta go to the mid-70s to New York for the band obviously gonna make everybody's top pick probably on the punk rock Mount Rushmore, and that would be the Ramones. Now, other people might say the Sex Pistols deserve this spot, but as far as the foundation for American punk rock music, I'm talking about the Ramones. I'm not gonna argue with you if you put the Sex Pistols here, because spoiler alert, I will be mentioning the Sex Pistols in the number 1 position maybe a little bit later, but not on the actual Mount Rushmore. On the actual Mount Rushmore, you got Joey and Jimmy and Johnny and Jefferson and all the other Ramones you've come to know and love, all taking up the first spot. Oh, you know Jimmy and Jefferson, everybody's favorite Ramone. Age-old debate, who's your favorite Ramone, Jimmy or Jefferson? But seriously, Joey, Johnny, Marky, Dee Dee, all of those guys, you know, the Ramones. Obviously, first spot. Now, the next spot we're going to talk about is the expansion of punk rock. There's a multitude of branches we could go off into when we talk about the expansion of punk rock. But for this one, I think we just got to go a little bit later than the 70s, just to the early 80s. We're gonna head to the DIY hardcore scene of DC. Now, there's a couple different bands you could put here, but I think the only one that deserves to be here is Minor Threat. Ian MacKaye really laid down the expansion of what punk rock was. Before Ian MacKaye, it was still punk rock bands trying to find clubs, trying to find venues, and trying to play that kind of rock and roll, but in like established places. What Ian MacKaye did was, he was like, no, we don't need any establishment whatsoever. We don't need a bar, we don't need a club, we don't need a bouncer. All we need is a big open room and a couple amplifiers. So on the musical side, they brought a whole new ferocity. Minor Threat set a whole new tone for hardcore music and a whole new principle that backed up hardcore music. In the 70s, it was about destruction, it was about chaos, it was about rebellion and anarchy. What Ian MacKaye did was, he was like, no, this is about community, this is about doing it yourself, this is about building it up, and those principles resonated as more punk rock. It was a controlled chaos, rather than just like a frenzied chaos. Ian MacKaye taught us how to rein it in. And without him, maybe we wouldn't have gotten more extreme on the music side. Maybe we wouldn't have got so DIY on that side of things either, if it wasn't for Minor Threat and that goddamn guy, Ian MacKaye. The next face on Mount Rushmore represents development. Now, we gotta stay early doors here because a lot of people developed punk rock a lot further later on. So in the early Doors days, we don't need to go any farther than DC for this band as well. In the development spot, I'm gonna slot in Rites of Spring. Guy Picciotto. I can never figure out how to say his name. Guy Picciotto. According to that translator, it's Picciotto. I've never pronounced it Picciotto a day in my life. But either way, Guy Picciotto is gonna be the other face up there representing Rites of Spring and the development of punk rock music. Guy Picciotto, that's what I've always called him. That's what I'm probably gonna keep calling him. Guy Picciotto. That's what makes most sense to me. Anyway, he represents the heart and soul of punk rock music. It's not about anger anymore. It's about emotions. It's about feelings. It's about getting in touch with yourself. Guy Picciotto and Rites of Spring are kind of hailed as the first emo band, and they really didn't like that term. They're like, all music is emo. All hardcore is emo. All punk rock is emo. What are you talking about with this emo thing? But to this day, Rites of Spring and Guy Picciotto are credited as the godfathers of emo. And because of how big emo got, you know he's up there as well. And it's just kind of ironic that these last two guys I talked about, Ian MacKaye and Guy Picciotto, could be up there as well in a band that they had together called Fugazi. I've never been that big of a Fugazi guy, but I would not argue anybody's list that put them up there. The fourth pillar is preservation. Now we've been going through the decades. We got some 70s, we got some 80s, and I don't really feel comfortable going any farther than the early 90s. So I'm gonna say for preservation, this might be a little bit controversial. A lot of old heads, a lot of really true blue punkers might not agree with this one, but for preservation in 1994, we wouldn't have had that extremely huge punk rock boom if it wasn't for Green Day. I'm sorry, Green Day's on the Mount Rushmore. It's not my fault. I tried to be as objective as possible, even though this is very subjective. But as far as preserving punk rock going into further decades, how can you choose anybody other than Green Day? They blew it up bigger than it's ever gotten. Maybe they even made the most money off of punk rock out of any band in the history of bands. All the pop punk bands that they inspired, and then they did it again in the 2000s when they had to reinvent themselves with American Idiot. So it's not really a deep cut. Maybe it's a little bit controversial or hard to hear, but I think that it is a matter of fact that Billy Joel Armstrong and his merry band of punk rockers belong up there with the likes of Ian MacKaye, Guy Picciotto, and all of the Ramones. So that's pretty cool for an official Mount Rushmore or whatever, but there's still the other two kinds of Mount Rushmores that most people discuss when they bring up Mount Rushmores. 4 favorite and 4 most influential. So for the 4 most influential / important, my list is as follows. Number 1 up there is going to be The Clash. Number 2 up there is going to be the Sex Pistols, and that covers the UK. And then over in America, Black Flag and the Misfits. And I think that Mount Rushmore is even hard to dispute, but I would love for you to argue it down below. What is your personal 4 most important punk rock bands? Now it's time to talk about the 4 most favorite bands as far as me personally. I'm talking all-time favorites that went on to influence other all-time favorites, and I'm not just gonna stick to the early stuff here. But number 1, Operation Ivy. Don't even need to think about that. Number 2, Title Fight. Don't even need to think about that either. And then for the final 2, let's go all the way back to the 80s. Let's talk about Milo. Let's talk about Bill. You know the Descendants are absolutely up there. Hermosa Beach's finest. And then for the only repeat band on this list, in my final spot over here, is another one of my favorite bands of all time. I already spoke about them here in this video. It's Minor Threat. I just want to shout out Steven Larson for getting this Mount Rushmore discussion going in my brain. I told him I was going to steal this concept today, and that I did. So Steve and/or Larson, if you're creep watching, if you're lurking around here somewhere, poke your head out and say what's up. It's okay to be nice to your thieves. So those are all my Mount Rushmores. I put a lot of thought into this. I would like to know your personal Mount Rushmores. And just so you know, we have a 3-hour rule around here. If you comment anything within the first 3 hours, I will respond. Hell, if you don't want to contribute to this conversation at all, leave a bunch of pancake emojis, mapley, syrupy, sticky stacks, and I'll respond to those as well. I'll respond to pancakes no matter when they're left. If you put pancakes down there 3 years after this video goes out, I'll still reply to those pancakes. Pancakes are the key to my heart, okay? Right on, bro. That was fun. See you later.